She appeared on a freezing night, a little girl no older than 8, her arms covered in bruises, clutching a torn rabbit as if it were the last piece of safety left in the world. She knelt at the gate of a millionaire's mansion and whispered, "Please help my mom." In that instant, Jack Callahan's carefully guarded world cracked wide open. This isn't just a story about wealth or power. It's about a broken man who lost everything, and a child who carried nothing but scars and hope. It's about how two shattered lives collided in the dark and found light in each other. Stay with us because what follows will move you, shake you, and remind you that love can rebuild even the coldest of homes. And if you believe in second chances, subscribe now to Hidden Echo Stories. The night was bitter on the edge of Minnesota Lake, the kind of cold that seemed to sharpen every sound and freeze every memory in place. Jack Callahan eased his Mercedes onto the long gravel drive, the headlights washing over a house that looked more like a monument than a home. He had built it for his wife, Melissa, years ago. Now it stood like a mausoleum, every window dark, every room echoing with the silence that followed her death. Jack stepped out, the crunch of gravel beneath his polished shoes too loud in the stillness. He lingered with one hand on the car door, reluctant to let go of the warmth inside. In the past, laughter and music used to spill across this same yard, Melissa teasing him for neglecting her roses, the sound of children running through sprinklers in summers long gone. Now there was only frost clinging to the branches and a gnawing emptiness that pressed against his chest with every breath. As he walked toward the steps, something stopped him cold. A sound, faint, broken, drifted through the wind. At first he thought it was an animal caught in the fence. But then it came again, unmistakably human, a sob. Jack's pulse kicked. He turned his head, scanning the shadows near the old iron gate. There, half hidden in the mud, was a little girl. She couldn't have been more than 8, her body curled tight against the bars, arms wrapped around a ragged stuffed rabbit. The hem of her thin dress was soaked and torn, her hair matted to her cheeks. But it was her arms that made Jack's chest constrict, bruises, deep and ugly, mapped across her skin like dark constellations. A story of pain written where no child should ever bear it. For a long moment, he simply froze, the keys biting into his palm. Her eyes lifted to him, gray-blue, wide with terror, yet filled with a desperate pleading that cut through him sharper than the wind ever could. "Please," she whispered, voice trembling, "please don't send me back, help my mom." Jack's thoughts scattered. Was this some cruel trick? Where were her parents? Who had hurt her? He glanced toward the neighboring houses, but when a porch light flickered on across the street, the girl flinched so violently she pressed herself deeper against the iron bars, choking back sobs that sounded less like words and more like the cries of a trapped animal. Instinct drowned out doubt. Jack crouched low, careful, his voice soft as he eased closer. "Hey, it's okay. You're safe. No one's going to hurt you here." He shrugged off his coat, draping it gently around her shaking shoulders. At first she stiffened, but when she felt no threat, she clutched the rabbit close and allowed the warmth to envelop her. Jack wrestled with the gate, the rusted metal shrieking in protest, before he finally swept her into his arms. She was light, far too light for her age, and cold as river stones. Crossing the threshold of his mansion, Jack felt something shift inside the house. It wasn't the chandeliers or the marble foyer that made it change. It was her presence, raw, trembling, real. For the first time in years, someone needed him, not for money or deals or contracts, but for survival. He placed her gently on a bench near the radiator, still wrapped in his coat. In the kitchen, he poured a mug of warm water and returned, kneeling at her side. "It's just water," he said softly. "You don't have to drink if you're not ready." She studied him with the wary eyes of a stray. After a long pause, she reached out, fingers trembling, and took a sip. The cup seemed too big in her hands, but she clung to it as if it might vanish. "What's your name?" Jack asked. For a moment there was silence, then barely audible, "Maddie." "That's a pretty name," Jack said, his voice gentler than he remembered it ever being. "I'm Jack. I live here." She didn't answer, just hugged the rabbit tighter, eyes darting toward the door. When Jack noticed the cuts and scrapes on her hands, he reached for a towel. But Maddie jerked back, whispering, "Don't, please." He stopped immediately, heart sinking. "Okay, no touching, I promise." The grandfather clock chimed in the hall, filling the silence that followed. Jack's mind wrestled with responsibility. He should call the police. He should let the system handle this. But every time he looked at Maddie's haunted face, something fierce rose inside him. What if calling child services sent her straight back to whoever had bruised those tiny arms? Not tonight, he decided. Instead, he sat down a safe distance away, letting the quiet stretch between them. Slowly, her sobs faded into hiccups. Finally, when she could barely keep her eyes open, he offered softly, "You can stay as long as you need. You're safe here. I won't let anyone send you anywhere you don't want to go. I swear." Her chin trembled, but she gave the smallest nod. He fetched a blanket, and when he returned, Maddie was already drifting toward sleep, curled on the bench with the rabbit pressed against her cheek. As he tucked the blanket around her, she reached out suddenly, her tiny fingers clutching the hem of his coat. Jack's breath caught. He knelt back down, letting her hold on. For the first time in years, he didn't retreat to his office or numb himself with a drink. Instead, he sat in the hallway just beyond the bench, listening to the sound of her breathing as snow whispered against the windows. And in that fragile silence, something inside him cracked. The walls he had built around his grief, the fortress of loneliness he thought would protect him, broke wide open. All because one small girl, with bruises on her arms and nowhere left to go, believed enough to whisper for help. By dawn, Jack was still sitting there, a quiet sentinel, knowing with absolute certainty that nothing about his life would ever be the same again. Morning light filtered weakly through the frosted windows, but inside Jack Callahan's mansion, the air was thick with unease. Jack stood in the kitchen, 2 mugs of cocoa cooling untouched, his phone buzzing nonstop with reminders of million-dollar contracts and urgent calls from lawyers. Yet none of it mattered. All he could see was the little girl curled on the foyer bench, still clutching his coat as if it were a shield. When he stepped into view, Maddie flinched, her eyes darting toward the front door as if planning an escape. Jack froze, careful not to crowd her. He placed the cocoa gently on a side table and crouched low, his voice soft. "No one will come in here unless I say so, Maddie. You're safe. Would you like some toast?" She didn't answer. Her small fingers twisted the fabric of his coat, knuckles white. Jack's chest ached. He wanted to reach out, to fix every scrape, every bruise, but he knew too much pressure would only drive her further into fear. Minutes later, she retreated into the guest closet, dragging his coat with her, curling up beneath the hanging jackets. Jack stood in the doorway, helpless, as she pressed herself into the wall to escape his shadow. He closed the door gently, the sound echoing louder than it should have. He told himself he should call the authorities. That was what people did in situations like this. But her voice from the night before haunted him. "Please don't send me back." The thought of returning her to the hands that caused those bruises was unbearable. Jack paced the halls, Melissa's photograph catching his eye on the fridge. Her smile, frozen in time, seemed to whisper her old mantra, "Do what's right, even when it's messy." But Jack's entire life had been about avoiding mess. Contracts, negotiations, control, that was his armor. This little girl was chaos he couldn't manage with signatures or settlements. By noon, he couldn't bear the weight alone. He called Rachel Morgan. Rachel was steady, practical, the kind of woman who carried calm into every room. She listened as Jack stumbled through his words. "There's a girl, Maddie. I found her outside last night. She's terrified, Rachel. She won't eat, won't talk. She begged me not to call anyone." "How bad are the injuries?" Rachel's tone sharpened. Jack swallowed hard. "Bruises up and down her arms, cuts on her hands. She's hiding in my closet." "You did the right thing calling me," Rachel said firmly. "Kids don't run unless something is very wrong. Keep her safe. I'll come over as soon as I can. Don't push her." When the line went dead, Jack stared at his reflection in the window. He barely recognized the tired man staring back, hair mussed, eyes red, shoulders weighed down by more than business deals. For the first time in years, his wealth meant nothing. He would have traded every dollar for the right words to ease Maddie's fear. Hours passed. Jack sat outside the closet, speaking gently through the door. Little stories about his childhood dog, the time he got lost in a corn maze, the kind of harmless memories meant to coax trust. He didn't know if Maddie was listening, but he kept talking anyway. When Rachel arrived, her hospital badge still clipped to her shirt, she brought with her the kind of quiet strength Jack desperately needed. She moved carefully, kneeling so she was eye level with Maddie. "Hi there, Maddie," she said softly. "I'm Rachel. I just want to make sure you're okay. Can I sit with you?" Maddie hesitated, then gave the smallest nod. Rachel didn't crowd her, didn't press, just asked gently if she could look at her arms. Maddie's terrified glance shot to Jack, and he gave her a slow, reassuring nod. Trembling, she pushed up the sleeve of his oversized coat. Rachel's eyes darkened as she traced each bruise, each scrape, her expression steady but lined with quiet fury. Jack felt helpless watching it unfold, the evidence of violence etched into a child's skin. A lifetime of negotiating with powerful men had never made him feel as powerless as he did in that moment. Rachel's voice was soft but serious. "These aren't accidents. Someone did this, Maddie. Did it happen at home?" Maddie's lips pressed into a thin line. "I can't say," she whispered. Jack crouched beside her, his voice low. "You don't have to go anywhere you don't want to. You're safe here, I promise." Tears welled in Maddie's eyes, but she shook her head hard, choking out. "Promise you won't let them take me." "I promise," Jack said, his hand resting on the table where she could see it, close enough to reach but not touching. Rachel exchanged a look with him, warning and plea rolled into one. They needed help, real help. She pulled out her phone and called Detective Sam Bennett, a man she trusted not just as an officer, but as someone who understood broken systems. Sam arrived, his suit rumpled, eyes kind but sharp with experience. He placed his badge gently on the counter for Maddie to see. "I'm not here to scare you, Maddie," he said. "My job is to keep kids safe." But when he mentioned the word police, Maddie bolted. She sprinted through the hallway, vanishing into the shadows of the furnace room. Jack followed, heart pounding, and found her huddled behind the water heater, knees to her chest, eyes wild with terror. "Maddie, it's okay," Jack said, crouching low. "You're not in trouble. No one is going to take you away. Not tonight." Her voice cracked, desperate. "He'll hurt my mom if I talk. Please don't let them find me." Jack's chest split with helplessness. All he could offer was presence, the steadiness of not leaving her. "I'll stay right here as long as you need," he whispered. When he finally coaxed her back, Rachel's eyes told him the truth. This wasn't a quick fix. The danger wasn't just bruises, it was bigger, darker, and closing in fast. Detective Bennett worked his contacts, and by midday he traced Maddie's mother, Lisa Parker, to a rundown apartment in the city. The place reeked of sickness and struggle. On a bedside table, Jack found a notebook page scrawled with shaky handwriting. "If anything happens to me, protect Maddie." The words hit him like a hammer. Lisa was gone, missing or worse, leaving Maddie with no one but him. When Jack returned home that night, Maddie was pale and shivering. Fever burned through her small body. Rachel didn't hesitate. "We need the ER, now." Jack carried Maddie through sleet-slick streets, his arms wrapped tight around her fragile frame. In the chaos of the hospital, as nurses rushed her to a bed, Maddie clung to Jack's sleeve with surprising strength. Even in her weakness, her grip refused to let go. Sitting by her side through the long hours, Jack realized something life-altering. It wasn't only Maddie who needed saving. He did too. And somehow, in this impossible storm, they were saving each other. Thunder rolled over Lake Harriet like distant cannons, shaking the windows of Jack Callahan's mansion. Rain lashed against the glass in furious waves, and every gust of wind seemed to whisper a warning. Jack paced the hallway, nerves frayed, phone clutched in his hand. The threats Brad had left on his voicemail echoed in his mind. Back off or the kid gets it. Maddie lay restless in the guest room, clutching her rabbit and the walkie-talkie Jack had given her. Channel 6, their private lifeline. Each time lightning flashed, she jolted awake, eyes wide, breath shallow. Down the hall, Jack sat awake too, every sense tuned to her slightest movement, every creak of the house raising his pulse. Rachel had stayed late, sensing the tension that gripped the air. She found Jack in the kitchen, his hands trembling as he tried to steady a kettle. "You're unraveling," she said softly. He gave a hollow laugh. "I can't lose her, Rachel. I can't let him win." "You won't," she said, gripping his arm. "She trusts you, that's everything." Neither of them noticed the shadow moving on the security feed until Sam's urgent call came through. "Jack, he's on the property. Lock every door. We're moving in." The words hit Jack like ice. He sprinted down the hall as Rachel hurried to Maddie's room. The girl was already half awake, trembling. "He's here, isn't he?" she whispered. Jack crouched beside her, forcing his voice calm. "Listen to me, Maddie. We stay together. Nobody's taking you. Not tonight." Her hands clutched his coat, refusing to let go. Then came the sound, the back door crashing open, heavy footsteps pounding through the hall. Rachel braced the bedroom door with a chair as Jack shielded Maddie behind him. His heart hammered, torn between fight and fear, but he knew one truth: he would not surrender her. "Come out, kid." Brad's voice, rough and slurred, echoed through the house. "You think you can hide from me?" Maddie whimpered, burying her face in Jack's back. He whispered stories he once told her about secret rooms and escape ladders, anything to keep her grounded. But inside, rage burned. He had lost Melissa to tragedy. He would not lose Maddie to a monster. The footsteps drew closer, then chaos erupted. Doors slammed, voices thundered. "Police! Stay where you are!" Sam's team stormed in, guns drawn. Within moments, Brad was dragged down, cuffed, cursing as his face pressed against marble. The fight ended as quickly as it began. Jack dropped to his knees beside Maddie, gathering her trembling body into his arms. Only then did the tears come, silent, searing, years of fear breaking loose. Rachel knelt with them, her arms around both, rain streaking down her face like tears of her own. Sam's voice softened. "It's over, he won't touch her again." Jack could only nod, stroking Maddie's tangled hair, whispering, "You're safe, I swear." Hours later, as dawn broke pale and fragile over the lake, news arrived. Lisa Parker had been found alive. She was hurt, frail, but alive, and asking for Maddie. When Maddie heard, relief and fear tangled on her small face. Jack wrapped both arms around her, whispering, "You did it. Your mom is safe. And so are you." For the first time since Melissa's death, Jack felt something stir inside him. Hope, raw and undeniable. In the weeks that followed, the house that once echoed with silence bloomed with life. Maddie's laughter, cautious at first, slowly filled the halls. Her drawings decorated the walls: crooked houses, yellow suns, stick figures holding hands. One word scrawled again and again: home. Jack pinned them above the fireplace, each sketch a reminder that he wasn't just protecting Maddie. She was healing him, teaching him to live again. But the past still cast its shadows. Brad's threats lingered even from jail, and the system weighed heavy with questions. Yet every night when Jack tucked Maddie into bed, she reached for his hand and whispered, "Don't let him find me." "I won't," Jack promised, "not ever." And slowly, she began to believe it. The storm that had once threatened to tear them apart had instead forged something unbreakable. A millionaire who thought he had lost everything, and a little girl who had nothing left, had found in each other the one thing they both needed most: family. That night of thunder and fear had changed them forever, and in its aftermath, Jack Callahan finally understood: home wasn't marble floors or locked gates. Home was Maddie's small hand in his, a fragile trust stronger than any storm. There are stories that end when the storm passes, when the villain is taken away in handcuffs, when safety is restored. But some stories do not end there. They continue in the quiet mornings after, in the slow rebuilding of trust, in the fragile laughter that creeps back into a home once hollowed out by grief. Jack Callahan thought he was finished with life. His mansion was nothing but a tomb for memories, a place where silence pressed down harder than the Minnesota snow. Yet one desperate child with bruised arms arrived at his gate and shattered everything he thought he knew. Maddie came with nothing but fear and a broken rabbit in her hands, but she gave Jack something priceless, a reason to hope again. Through nights of fever, whispered promises in the dark, and the terror of a man who sought to control through violence, their bond grew stronger than blood. Maddie did not just find safety in Jack's house, she found family. And Jack, in saving her, discovered that perhaps she had been saving him all along. That is the miracle of love. It doesn't erase scars. It doesn't promise an easy path, but it takes shattered pieces and begins to weave them into something new, something whole. Maddie's drawings taped to the walls, her quiet piano notes drifting down the hall, her whispered "Dad" in the stillness of night. These became proof that healing is real, that hope is never lost, no matter how dark the night. And maybe that is why this story matters so deeply. Because it reminds us that family is not always written in bloodlines, but in the choices we make, the promises we keep, the hands we refuse to let go of. It reminds us that the world can be harsh and cruel, but within that world there are still second chances, still homes waiting to be built, still lives waiting to be saved by kindness. If Maddie and Jack's journey touched your heart, then you understand that stories like this are not just fiction. They are reflections of a truth we all need. That love, courage, and compassion can transform even the coldest mansion into a warm home. Here at Hidden Echo Stories, we believe in sharing these kinds of tales, the ones that echo long after the video ends, the ones that remind us of the resilience of the human spirit and the quiet power of love to change lives. So if you believe, like we do, that kindness still matters, that broken hearts can be mended, and that even in the darkest places there is light, then join us. Subscribe to Hidden Echo Stories, and let's keep these echoes alive together.